Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir, bienvenue au Palais des BOZAR. C'est un vrai plaisir de vous voir si nombreux ce soir. Dames en heren, welkom in het Paleis voor Schone Kunsten. Het is heel fijn om jullie zo talrijk te zien voor deze avond.
Bonsoir tous. No, it's really lovely for me to be here, and thank you, Sophie, for inviting me and all of us. It's tricky, this situation, in a way, because I'm being asked to put things into words, and I make things that are still and silent, and that's why they're worth dealing with. For me, sculpture is about the art of the palpable. It's about material, trying to make a material account of being, and I think that's my radical position, that if you think of a traditional sculptor, particularly male sculptor, certainly in the 19th, 18th, 17th century, the work was made at arm's length, either in clay or in marble, idealized bodies, often female. And I made the decision quite early on that if I was going to make a body, if I was going to refer to the space of the body, it was better to use my own as my, I guess, model, as my tool, as my material, simply because that was the only bit of the material world that I happened to inhabit. Sculpture acts on memory, but I don't think sculpture is about, well, maybe in its traditional form it may have been a form of capturing memory. So the statue is either an idealized or a realized attempt to capture the memory of a life. But I think that sculpture has always had a relationship with time and with mortality, and I think the idea that we all know that we won't exist forever, that our lives are fragile and provisional and dependent. And I think it's been very deep in the human psyche, the need to somehow, these hands in Pechmal or in Lascaux or Altamira or Chauvet, the hands that call to us across time, waving, saying, I was here. This wish to have a dialogue through the agency of geological time that is in duration longer than biological time. This is very, very, I think, deep in the human.
I mean, I wanted to ask if architecture for you has the same position or the same stature as sculpture.
You could say that, I don't know who it was, maybe it was Corbusier said that architecture is inhabited sculpture. But I think the languages of architecture are something that I think deeply interests me. But you could say the languages of architecture is the syntax now increasingly of our lives. We know that we passed the point about 11 years ago where 50% of the human race was now urban. And by the middle of this century, it'll be more like 80%. So the fact is that the hominid evolution is now indistinguishable from this context that we've made for ourselves, a designed world. And I think it affects us I think there was a moment when I think it was genuinely believed that architecture was an instrument of social improvement, and I think we all suffered in a way from the hubris of that in the 60s. But I think the fact is that architecture is an incredibly powerful way of opening one's valves of feeling, allowing space itself to be the medium of a kind of extended life. We all live the other side of our appearances. We then clothe our bodies with clothes. We have a skin, but then we have this second skin, which is the skin of our chosen habit. But then we clothe ourselves further in buildings, and buildings cohere into villages, towns, cities. And I think the nature of human being in this final stage of our evolution, I don't think the planet can handle many more than 10 billion. We have become synonymous with our context, and we are dependent upon it. All of the tools that now we use on a daily basis, in some senses, are an extension of the urban grid. And I guess that has become a very important sounding board for the work. I'm saying, can we use? It's not true of all of the work, but a lot of the work refers to architecture and asks that question: is it possible to use the syntax of architecture, the second, which I think of as the second body, to describe the first? And in doing so, what feelings and thoughts arise? And this is an open question. And as the work becomes more open, so the questions become more open.
Barthold Schaffel wrote an interesting text also about your work, and in that text at a certain moment he quotes this phrase by Paul Valéry, l'histoire de ma petite maison, and so I will say it in English, where he tells this when he was very young, 6 or 8 years old, and he's in his bed and he takes the sheets, his long nightgown over him, and he kind of hides in this bag, and then he says, I squeezed myself like a fetus, and I hugged my chest and repeated to myself, my little house, my little house. It kept with me because I'm a very claustrophobic person, and claustrophobia, it's I feel it like a defense mechanism when you are so when you have the feeling that your body is in harm, or you want to protect it, or you're afraid to be imprisoned and not imprisoned and not being able to breathe, and so it was something also I was wondering, which does it has a meaning somewhere in your work as well, this claustrophobic.
It's funny, Sophie, because I think I suffered from claustrophobia very acutely as a child, and I remember being sent off to school and
really?
Feeling that I had to, I suppose, establish my right to, in a way, exist by overcoming my fear of tight, small, dark places. And I remember doing this thing where going down my bed. This was hospital corners. This is a Benedictine monastic school, no heating, cold dormitory with 16 boys aged 12 to 14. And going backwards down the bed, tight, damp, dark, so that my head was right at the other end from the pillow. and trying to deal with the panic. Just dealing with how I wanted to escape.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that all of those early childhood things made me feel that actually maybe the biggest adventure one can have is actually to go inside and to accept this vehicle that, you know, we each have a body that has come out of another body that we will never fully know, that has its own agenda. You know, as I'm speaking to you now, I'm aware there are maybe 500,000 bacteria in my mouth. This body that we, for convenience, say, my body. This isn't my body. This is just a body that I happen to inhabit. Maybe the greatest adventure of all is actually to somehow give an account of the mystery of being conscious within a body, and that actually we may say that the body displaces space, but it also contains it. There is a connection, is what I'm trying to say, between our internal intuition about the nature of consciousness and its spatial quality and space itself.
Yeah, it's like about you try to put when you were talking about these pieces and these lines, and I think this claustrophobia thing also comes from precisely from the fact you want to escape, and when you're in this space, you also, the idea, it's driving you crazy when you think about what's beyond the other space and what's beyond the other space and what's beyond the other space, and this at a certain moment it becomes so scary that you kind of prefer to go into your little house. And but this it's
I don't know about the scary thing. I mean, I think I'm over the scary thing. I'm more excited about the continuity than the in a way retreat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, you know. Yeah, a lot of people have tried to suggest that somehow the work is existential and deals with the alienation of the individual and all of that. And I'm not sure that I accept that. I just feel that we are most intensely alive when we are, as it were, simply being, not doing. So just standing, you know, in front of the sea, still, and looking out towards the edge of our world. You know, I think that is a moment for me when we are most intensely human and intensely aware, alert.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that as being, you know, I think that invitation in a way to make connections is more important to me than in a way kind of giving images of isolation, because I don't think that's really what I'm interested in. I guess I'm always wanting to make connection, but the thing I'm trying to make connection with is the thing that we are not. And I think that sculpture is a very peculiar thing. Sculpture, you know, is this material thing that takes up living room, you might say, and confronts us with our own, in a way, movement through space, with our own physicality. But at the same time, you know, I want it to be an instrument that connects us with the things that we don't have words for. And this whole thing of who are we, and do we define ourselves against others, or do we recognize that we are all others, and that we are, in a fundamental way, others to ourselves, facing the unknown in our inner lives, I think is the bravest thing that anyone can do, but something that, for whatever reason, our society doesn't allow us to do. And I think we are all guilty of the fact that there are people who somehow are not given a place. And I think there is an inherent empathy in the work, in spite of everything that I said about denying the idea of isolation in the work. I think that the one of the first slides to be shown was just called Sleeping Place, and came from, I made it in 1975 in the second year of my art school training, but it was really a memory of coming into Howrah station in Calcutta and seeing the hundreds of people sleeping on the streets, and the fragility of these shell-like sculptures. I always thought of them as sculptures because it's just a dhoti, a thin linen cloth wrapped around a body that rendered it completely abstract and declared, here is a fragile, intimate human life. Sometimes you just see a transistor radio or a pair of shoes parked next door to the head, and you didn't know whether they were dead or alive. Anyway, that was a very important message to me about how it's possible to make very intimate things in collective spaces. And I've tried to do that. I continue to do that. So to reinterrogate life as a whole by these still silent bodies that are just things in the world that I think of as, in a way, acupuncture points that can be done in a city or it can be done in a landscape. But the other thing is, who does art belong to? Well, I think art belongs to everyone. I think the delusion that we own our bodies is one thing. The delusion that we can own anything is another. And that sculpture is of its nature, I think, a public art form. I don't believe this distinction between art that is. Who asked for art to be privatized? Art is the way that life expresses itself. It is a gift. It's a gift to be able to practice it. It only really becomes real when it's shared. So I think, everything that Duchamp talked about, the viewer doing half the work, what Antony Gormley called the beholder's share. The idea that the artist might identify a space, a place for our imaginations, but that actually only begins to start having value when it is perceived and shared, and that space is occupied imaginatively by the perception and intelligence of a viewer.